So, hi everyone, it's Nina Collins, and I'm here this afternoon with Juliana Hauser. Hi, Juliana.
Hi.
Um, Dr. Juliana is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a counselor with a PhD in counseling education. For 20 years, she's worked with clients to help them manage relationships, sexuality, confidence, infertility, and more. She's been featured on Oprah, CBS, the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, etc. And she has a course called Revealed, Uncovering Your Sexual Story. And that's what we're kind of mostly going to talk about today. We met Juliana because a Wolfer introduced us, Lori Marvald. And for some of you who are listening may know that Lori is a big fan of Betty Dodson, who is the famous sexual educator who had women, she recently died, gather in large groups or small groups and masturbate together, among many other things. But I've spoken to Lori a lot about her passion for Betty. So when Lori said that we should meet you, I said, absolutely.
Yes, so I'm so glad. I'm so happy to meet you and to be able to talk to your community.
Yeah, and you have a great accent and you're from Kentucky, which I think is cool.
Yes.
You live in Kentucky. So, all right. So the way this was pitched to me was this course that you have called Revealed, Uncovering Your Sexual Story. And I read in some of your course materials, the idea is like a course, a community, a movement, unlock your sexual agency. So tell me what sexual agency is, and then tell me a little bit about, and I'll kind of interrupt and ask questions about what it means to tell your sexual story.
So one of my favorite things to talk about has really been like my life's work and passion. And it started off when and I'm going to back end to answer the question about what agency is, about how I got there. So
Please.
When I was finishing up my doctorate, I wanted to have a topic that I loved, and sex was one of the topics that I thought would be really interesting to share. And I had my own journey with. And so I started doing lots of research and talking to the students at Women Marry. And what I had several things that started coming up. One of them was that, bless you, bless you.
Thank you.
Was that I had a lot of people saying things just happened to me. My sexual life just happened to me. And I didn't have a lot of purpose or intention in it, nor did I really have a way to reflect upon what my journey was. And I started compiling stories, and I found it really interesting that some people would have the exact same story or very, very similar stories, but one person would feel really fulfilled and satisfied and content and maybe even proud of what their sexual journey was. But another person, especially another woman that had very similar circumstances and experiences, felt deeply shamed and guilt-ridden because of it. Yeah. And I had all these theories as to why that was the case. I thought it may be upbringing or religion, or it could be sex education, community, media, and all those things came into place. But really, I siphoned down to all of it, it became a matter of choice. And of course, that's relevant to assault or things with sexual violence. But even beyond that, like the stories where a woman said it was just easier to go along with it. I didn't feel coerced, but I didn't feel like dealing with it, or I was like people pleasing. And so those are the stories where I found that women had the most healing. And I started to look for a word that matched.
Wait, hold on. I just want to interrupt to understand. You felt like they had the most healing when they were aware of their own choice?
That those were the stories, and those were the women that had stuff just happen to them, or they didn't feel like they had a lot of choice in it or made a choice in it, were the ones that they're the ones that needed the healing. They're the ones that they didn't feel good about their sexual journey or about a certain sexual experience. Right. And I wanted to have a name for that other than choice, because I thought choice ended up being confusing. So I started looking for other terms, and the word agency just started feeling right. And so I tacked on sexual agency as a part of that. And I started talking about the concept, and it really resonated. And it took 20 years for me to refine it, but this is how I break down what sexual agency is. First is that you know that there's a decision to be made, which sounds really simple, but actually sometimes you're in the middle of a circumstance and before you know it.
Yeah. So I want to interrupt and just say here, and I am a big believer generally that I'm a big believer in agency in general. And I think, different people vary sorry, I have a dog in the room who's chasing his tail, on how much control, there are different philosophies in life about how much control you have over life. And I'm a big believer that we have a lot of control over our lives. So the concept of sexual agency and being aware of what choices you're making and how much power that gives you and how good that makes you feel makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And it's not natural for everybody, or not, there are a lot of people who aren't raised with models of agency or in a community that supports agency. I mean, we all know this isn't new to
no, but it's good to acknowledge. It's really true. And it's good to think about in terms of parenting, right? And raising kids. I mean, I always said to my girls, I have 3 girls and my son also, but more to the girls, like, I wanted them to feel like they should have sexual freedom and do what they wanted. But I said, always make sure you're doing what you want. Make sure it's your choice,
Yes.
So I agree.
And what I found is sometimes we don't know what we want, so that we have to back up even further of like, I agree. I want to do what I want only, but how do I know what I want? So the second step of agency and my definition of it is that you have confidence in your skills. So a lot of times I'm
sorry, the first thing that popped into mind is like your sexual skills. Like, are you going to give a job? But okay, what do you mean exactly? Confident in which?
Well, I mean, maybe that's a part of it, sure. But I'm actually meaning like that you're confident that you can make a good decision. And that you can make a decision, because when we've made decisions with purpose, intention, and they go to shit, then we can lose our confidence about what that means and put that into ourselves in a meaning that doesn't have to be there. And that starts a snowball effect of not having confidence of making a decision, or we learn how to put off our decisions on everyone else. And we just let other people make those decisions before we know it. Then we don't have to take responsibility for it, even though parts of us really want to. So have confidence that you make.
Now I have a question, because that's a really, really good point. And what I'm thinking about is I'm wondering, do you see that with grown women? Like, I see that a lot with my children, with, daughters, girls who are 17, 21, whatever. And I do think, we've run this community now for almost 6 years. So we've dealt with, thousands and thousands of amazing women. But I do think issues around choice making is interesting. Like, some people are really good at knowing what they want and knowing how to make a decision, and some people are really poor at it. So, but in terms of like confident in your, you think that I'm wondering who your clients are, I guess I should say. Do they fall, is it really all over the map?
It is. It is. And it's all genders also. All genders can relate to it. But specifically talking about women, it's all ages that I deal with. Most of the time when I'm working with women who are 30 on up, there's a grieving process of like, gosh, I wish I had had these conversations. I wish I had understood this concept when I was younger. It would have prevented this, and this. It's you don't just learn agency and then it's there. You have to hone it. You have to have muscle memory with it. And what I have seen too is that a woman could feel like she's a woman in agency and makes choices and good choices, and then something happens that doesn't make sense, which is actually the fourth thing. So the third part of sexual agency is then you make the decision. So you actually do the decision, have action as a part of it. Then the fourth thing is really where I started having aha moments, and this is where I see most of my clients is you've made the decision, you feel good about the decision you've made, and something unintended happens. Sometimes the unintended consequences of our decisions are great. It's better than we think. A sexual thing goes better, or a relationship is better, or our career decision goes better, but sometimes it's not. And those are the moments where you learn a lot about yourself, and you find out where you are in your confidence, in your resiliency.
Well, let's go through these 4 points with specific examples. So the first one is a decision that has to be made, right? There's a decision. Maybe you can talk about, like, give us an example of what we're talking about.
So I have, and I forgot to ask you ahead of time how graphic I can be in this. I wasn't
totally graphic, and you can also. I'm happy to be completely graphic myself. So if you want to use me as an example, I'm totally happy, and you can use whatever curse words, whatever sex words you want. It's all good.
Okay, great. I forgot to ask. So I can get two stories inside of an actual like obvious sexual behavior, and then one that's outside of obvious sexual connection. I have a lot of stories of women in their history talking about if they're heterosexual, getting into like a car with a guy. And like at a bar, that's where they're going to hook up. There's no other place to go. Or in high school, that was like the only way to get privacy. And before they knew it, like the guy or whatever was happening, they are walking towards a car to make out. And so at this point, is she aware that she is walking to a car and making a decision? Is she going to get in this car? What is she going to do with this guy? It's clear. It's clear that there's something sexual. That's why we're heading there. So is she saying yes? Is she realizing there's a decision, or is she just
as opposed to having this happen and after the fact saying it just happened? So being aware that you have a decision to make, that you're confident you're making your best informed decision in the moment.
Yeah,
that you're thinking it through.
Right. Instead of just focusing on, oh, I think he likes me, or this is really fun, or, or I'm not even paying attention that I'm away from the group. So then it's like, we're getting in the car. Let's just get in the car. Let's just do it. And again, I'm not talking about assault or coercion or rape in this sense. I'm just talking about happily, she's going to this place. And then she's like, okay, so she takes her moment and decides, yeah, I want to, and I want to be sexual with him right now. I want to do this. And this is okay with me. And I'm looking at my surroundings and I want to be with this guy, and I'm okay with where we're heading next. And I'm saying yes along the way. And I feel good that I can make a decision. Then the third thing is, do I want to give him a blowjob? Do I want to like get naked with him? Yes, I want to do that. Or are we not? Or
I only want to make out and I don't want him under my clothes or whatever.
That's right. And are you going into that with any kind of purposeful decision making? And with that, now making decisions can change.
Of course, that's just thinking the same thing.
Right. Like
particularly
right now,
in that situation.
That's right. But I'm talking too, like I have such a compilation of stories, honestly, of back seats of a car giving blowjobs, of women like sifting through it. And again, the details are so similar, but they look at it differently. Some will say like, we were just making out. I just wanted to talk to him. And yeah, we were flirting, but I just thought we could have privacy. And the next thing, no, he's pulled his dick out. And now what are we going to do? And he's asking me to give him a blowjob, and he's not forcing me to.
Right. But you're there, and then you feel like, it's the easiest thing to do, or
just get it out of the way. Or how do I say no and deal with the awkwardness? How do I get out of this car?
Extract yourself from the situation. Yeah. Right. And then you can really beat yourself up and feel like you somehow let yourself,
just decide to do it. And again, not talking about coercion, although obviously there's elements of coercion inside of this, but if you're not feeling that way and you're being actively making those decisions or not making those decisions, then the consequence, the fourth step, the unintended consequence, which is like, he doesn't like you. He just wanted the blow, and he doesn't do anything about your pleasure. He's not concerned about that. That's just what he wanted. You go back to the party, and that's it. And there we go. And what meaning do you make of this? Which is the fifth part and the last part of sexual agency, which is after you have the intended or unintended consequence of a decision, what do you do with the meaning making of that, especially the unintended parts? And that's where resiliency comes into play, or you respond by walling up and you go back to one of those four things and think, gosh, I don't even recognize what I'm doing with the decision, or I don't make good decisions. I don't trust myself. I don't trust other people. I'm never going to get in that situation again. Or I'm not even going to make decisions like this anymore in my life. And it usually goes back and you make some meaning of it, or you have resiliency in it, which is like, okay, that isn't what I wanted. What an asshole. And I'm not going to talk to him again, but I'm not a bad person, or that wasn't a bad decision. Now I know that doesn't feel good to do that. Or the opposite, it all goes how you wanted it to, and you're okay with the decision. And
so what do you chalk that up to, the different responses? This is super interesting to me. I mean, I completely understand everything you're saying, but does it come down to, are some people just naturally more resilient? Can you learn it? Is that really what you feel like your practice is doing, helping women claim agency and developing more resilience in sexual situations?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a lot of what I'm doing. And it's different for each woman, but it always goes back to one of those four places. We find, where is it that she has the biggest challenge? And it's different. And I can't always predict when a woman is first telling her stories. I can't always predict where it's going to be, but always a pattern emerges. And there's typically one or two like pivotal moments and pivotal stories that stand out, that then she made meaning of herself in a negative way and started doing more of a spiral of not trusting herself.
Interesting. Are there examples of stories? Because again, this does sound, I mean, I think all women could go through this, but it also sounds kind of young to me. Like these are experiences, like I haven't gotten into a car and given a blowjob.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
So I'm thinking about, how old are you, by the way?
50. Well, I'll be 50 in a couple months. Yeah.
Nice. Happy birthday. I'm 51. And by the way, your wallpaper really is amazing. We should point that out.
Thank you.
Lips all over your walls are cool. What do you typically see with middle-aged women? Are there scenarios that come up again and again? And I also want to point out to our listeners and viewers that obviously we're talking about a kind of heteronormative, but this applies to anything. It applies to women and men and everyone.
It does. And it's actually the majority of my clients are 40 on up. I would say 45 to 60 is the majority of who I work with when I work with them individually or with couples. And then in the groups, it's often a mixed age unless I purposely have a homogeneous group age-wise or experience-wise. But it's interesting. So when I work with people who are younger, they feel like they've been grounded, but I can work with a 20-year-old who said, I wish I had this when I was 15. I can work with somebody who's 70 and she's like, oh, I'm so glad I have it now. Thank goodness. I've got, 20 more years of my sexual journey and great. Now I'm going to claim it. So it's
great. How do people come to you? How do they decide? Like, how do you work with couples? Like, what's a typical like middle-aged couple situation? Are they not having good enough sex and they want to explore the ways in which they're not empowering themselves? I don't know. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, what's interesting is when you have agency and when you're learning how to strengthen your agency, but you're in a relationship with somebody else, one who isn't working in agency, or the relationship rules started before someone gained that. Like they didn't have a voice in the beginning of the relationship, but you've now gained it. And the other person is like, wait a second, that is not what I did not sign up.
Not sign up for your voice.
No. Or their agency that they've both grown in learning together doesn't work the same. But they love each other, or they want to be committed to each other, and they want help. I often
want help kind of crafting a new sexual language in a way, like a new way of communicating around these issues.
Or just even learning how to talk about your history. I don't mean necessarily blow by blow, but I believe that sexuality is the essence of who you are. And so I actually believe that when you go through your sexual journey, like through my course Revealed, really what you're learning through the lens of your sexual story is you are learning a deeper sense of who you are. And when I work with individuals or couples, it always boils down to what the discontent and discord is that someone isn't feeling either seen, valued, or understood. And we get at what that is. And sometimes that can come through looking at your sexual journey or the way that you look at your past and moving towards where you're moving to in your future. And sometimes it's just, we just need to rework the rules and decide who we are right now. Let's be very clear and authentic about what I know of myself and see how that matches up with what you know of yourself. A lot of what I do is I give people hope that you can reconnect and that you can reignite something when things have gone awry. Not everyone, when they've learned and grown and have self-development, can work together still, but you can figure that out if you have empathy and you are working in agency. And the last thing I would say about agency, although it's not in like the 5-step, is that if you really are a person in agency and acting in agency, you allow others to have their own agency as well. And that's not easy at all.
Because you really are grounded in your own boundaries, essentially, in your own, you know what you need, and then you're not threatened because you're kind of safe and secure in your own self, I would imagine.
Which yes, and it means that then, so you and I are friends and we're talking and I give you a boundary and you're like, what? Why would you give me that boundary? I don't like that. Or that doesn't feel good. And you acting your agency would be able to say that to me without it being a discord between us.
Right.
And how do we stand there as whole women saying, I disagree with what you just said. I disagree with this stance, but I love you. I want us to continue. And that sounds obvious, It is hard in practice.
No, it's really hard. I mean, this is the stuff of life, right? Negotiating relationships is very, very difficult. So tell me a bit, I love this. It's really interesting. So in your course, how do people, do you make people write their sexual stories? Like how long does the storytelling, tell us a little bit about how that works.
Yeah. So I mean, I have a variance of how long it takes to do it, but the standard one is 10 weeks. And I have a purposeful framework that we go through. We start off doing a timeline, and
Wait,
people do it.
Is it a bunch of people together, or is it a course that's like individualized?
It is both. Like there's like an evergreen one that has videos, and then there's one that I do live. And obviously before the pandemic, I did it actually in person live, in like a retreat or a weekend thing. And then I do it virtually also. We do like meet once a week. And I have facilitators that teach it now in 7 different countries. And it's really exciting that it goes this far and it reaches cross-culturally. It's just kind of beautiful.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's and actually when we're talking about agency, it's been fascinating. So one of my facilitators is in Israel, and it has just been so beautiful wrestling with and also a woman in Finland wrestling with how does the word agency translate to a different language, and then culturally how does that concept translate also. In some ways it's a very westernized concept, but then but then when you get to what the behavior is, like, oh no, that's a universal thing, especially like women. Yes, we all know what agency is.
Women know how to take charge. We don't always do it, but we know how to do it.
Right. That's right.
That's fascinating, actually.
Yeah.
So have you had to change the word? I guess you have had to maybe change the word in different countries.
Yeah. Yes. And it's really important to me that when you're writing your journey, it's one of the reasons why I want it to be in different countries, is that I didn't want it to have to be English, that if your first language isn't English, I wanted you to be able to write your story and understand what revealed is in your native tongue. So I'm not bilingual, so I have to have other people do it. And it's been beautiful seeing how that translates. But anyway, getting back to what the question that you asked, it is, you do a timeline. So I believe that a lot of introspection and understanding comes from a macro and a micro level. So we do a timeline, and depending on how old you are, it can take a while to go through different snapshots of your life, or it can be quicker. And people do it in different ways. I've had people do like photography. I've had people do sticky notes. I've had people do a whiteboard and draw a line. And it's
that's a kind of interesting challenge, I think, for our listeners to think about writing your own sexual story. So I'm kind of imagining like first sexual thought, first sexual image, and then obviously encounters and traumatic encounters or difficult encounters, most hottest encounters.
Right.
It could be quite long though.
Yeah, it can be. And so instead of getting overwhelmed, we just say, this is your first run at it, and just bullet point it, and we'll get back to it. And then I teach my view of what holistic sexuality is. And there's 10 parts of it. And we go through each of these deep dives and different topics. And then you realize by the end of it that our sexuality and looking at our sexual journey isn't just what we did with our bodies and with whom. It is so many things. It's desire. How does desire play into your sexual journey? How does pleasure? How does your health and reproduction? We get into your history with medical providers and the first time that you had your period, if your body has periods, and your reproductive and fertility journey. We get into where you are with sexualization, which is more like the traumatic, but also like, who are you as a flirt? What is your relationship like with seduction? We get into like, what is your identity, your gender identity, your views of gender roles. It's such a wide variety. We have, just as we all know, have been poorly educated in the sexual world. And so part of this course is to give the advanced sex education and to realize that holistic sexuality is so worth the time. And when you learn, and to me, I think that sexuality is like the final frontier of self-development. And I think it's one of the last things that we've done because it's so complicated, and because people have a huge investment in protecting who they are as a sexual person, their privacy or their values or their views.
Well, there's so much shame often, right? There's shame and embarrassment. It's it seems so unnecessary. Easy for me to say.
Yeah. And what I found too is like, for people who are more in our age group, one of the things, if you're partnered up, is that one, most of us weren't given a lot of space in order to talk about our sexual lives and to compare and contrast in a healthy way. Comparing and contrasting was often negative and was often a bad thing, like you're bad or I'm good or whatever it is.
Right.
And then if you partner up, the rules are kind of, and now you really can't talk about your sex with your husband or your wife. So we lose even more opportunity to learn more about ourselves. And this is a place.
I have to say that is one thing we really do in the Wolfer community. We talk a lot about sex, and I think women have really, we've all, myself included, really benefited from people being so frank and open about it, because then you do learn, like, you're not. I remember a thread about a woman saying that she could never come during oral sex, and people were shocked, because it's like it's kind of not a truism, but it's a little bit of a stereotype women love, gone down on, but some women don't love it. And these kind of examples of just having it be normalized, all the wide variety of experience is so valuable.
Releasing the shame, normalizing it is half the battle. And then educating yourself and feeling like it's okay to say these things and to claim it. So the other part of the course is I really believe and so everyone writes stories of healing and stories of celebration, that we should be able to say, I just had the best sex of my life last night. Or back then, this was incredible, beautiful part of me. Like I can seduce somebody like that or whatever, but that's not accepted. To say there's good
that's
parts.
a good point. That's a good point, to be able to brag about it a little bit, or whatever, or a lot.
Or have it acknowledged. And when we get to the reading parts of it, so within each of those topics, you write a story of healing and celebration. Then by the end, once you've gone through all 10, and agency is one of them, you pick 2 to read to the group. And there's never a dry eye. Every time I get goosebumps. Wow. Because one of the things, I really believe that storytelling is sacred. And
how large are the groups typically?
It varies. I keep virtual ones to the size of 10 so that everyone has like an intimacy part of it. When I do it live in retreats, it's much bigger. The biggest I've done is 50. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, when you're reading, and even I have done this, that I'm very comfortable in talking about stories. And I've read a story in front of people, I get nervous, and I'm like, you feel so vulnerable and so exposed. And you want, and one of kind of like the vibes that I put into the revealed group is that you don't respond. You are not just a listener, you're a witnesser to someone's sacred story. And so I give 3 lines that people give. You don't clap, you don't go hug them. You say, I am in awe of your strength. I really celebrate your bravery. And when you are the one reading your story and you're just like, oh God, what did I just put out in the world? And now what do you think? The answer is nothing but I see you, I see you, I see you. Mm-hmm. And that's what you just said matters to me. And that feels really beautiful. And then we end it with patterns and look at what your sexual goals are moving forward.
It sounds really great. So tell us how people can find you.
Yeah, so on Instagram at Dr. Juliana Hauser. It's 1 N and Juliana HAU. And then my website is Dr.-Juliana. And same on Facebook too. Yeah.
And the program is called Revealed, the course.
Revealed. Yes.
And everyone should check out Juliana's website. This is really interesting. You have a PhD in educational counseling?
Yeah. So I'm trained to train therapists.
Yeah. Yeah. And how many therapists do you have who work with you?
I'm in my solo.
You're the solo therapist, but you have
in my own practice, but I have 15 and growing all over the world.
It's really impressive. Very, very cool. Well, I'm going to send Lori a text and thank her for introducing us. And maybe we can do something else. We have a regular Monday night sex chat where women gather in a Zoom. It's great. It's like usually 15 to 30 women, and we have subjects and it's really fun. We talk about everything.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'd actually love to tell you, I have this new thing that I'm doing that's called the Sex Plan. And it is it's for singles, but mainly for couples also, that we do so much in our life. We plan, we do estate planning, we do nutrition planning, and we do not have a sex plan. But sex is such a huge part of our life. So I have like a 10-part series that is how to create your own sex plan for your life. And I'd love to talk to you about it.
That sounds great, actually.
Yeah.
Wait, I do want
Yeah.
to talk about that more. Okay, the sex
Good.
plan. So let's
Yeah.
email afterwards and maybe we'll do a part 2 because I want to write a sex plan.
Great. Yes.
Great.
I want
All right.
everyone to write a sex plan. Thank you. So good to see you.
Really, really
So
great to
happy
meet you.
connect.
And we'll follow up and do more.
Great.
All right.